Hi,
Hi,
my name is Duncan,
and I'm Josh.
and this is the second episode of Bibles, Brothers, and Bites.
This week, we're going to be talking about the letter to Timothy, the first one.
The first one. There's two of them. We're looking at the first one because that's what's coming up for your DT.
And ours too.
Yes.
So, yeah, I guess I haven't started really looking at the letter yet, because I've been pretty busy with work. So, if you could tell me, I don't know, what are some, like, big picture, like, context details about First Timothy that I should know before I read it?
Yeah, awesome. So I'm glad you asked that question, actually, because when it comes to the epistles and the pastoral letters like First Timothy, it's really important to have the context in mind. So First Timothy, who wrote it? That's the first question, right?
Timothy wrote it.
No.
Oh.
Paul wrote it. Yeah.
Paul wrote it, yeah.
So Paul wrote it to Timothy.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So I think...
Wait, but then the book of James, like, that's not written to James.
Yeah, so it's kind of weird. I don't think they had like a system going on. It was just like whatever happened to be like the popular opinion of the book. Name of the book.
So James wrote James.
Yeah, James wrote James.
But Paul
wrote First Timothy.
Okay, he also wrote Titus.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Cool. Yeah, glad you figured that one out.
Yep.
Yeah. So the letter to Timothy was written a few years after the events of Acts 28. If you remember, if you read Acts. Have you read Acts?
Yes, but what's Acts 28?
So Acts 28, we end the book with Paul, still in prison.
Yeah.
And
he was in prison a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But apparently this time he did not leave. So Acts 28, we end with him in prison, and it's a while between Acts 28 and this book, this letter. Some scholars think it's about 3 to 5 years that he wrote this letter afterwards.
Okay.
And if you remember from Acts 19, he'd started the church at Ephesus, and
yes.
He had this really moving speech that he gave to the elders before he left.
Yes.
And that was there's speculation, but that could have been the last time that he was at Ephesus.
Okay.
And the entire time that he was all around in Rome and in prison, he'd left Timothy in charge of the church, not only the church at Ephesus, but also the churches around Asia.
Okay, so Timothy, so Paul planted the church at Ephesus, and that's like Acts chapter 19-ish.
Yeah.
And then Paul does his apostle missionary thing, and then he leaves. But then he has Timothy kind of be in charge of that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's been a while, and it seems like things have happened with the church that he left.
In Ephesus.
Yeah, in Ephesus, the church in Ephesus. So this is kind of like Paul's way to encourage Timothy and also to give him direction.
Wait, okay, so this letter is not, because I know a lot of Paul's other letters, like Romans, Ephesians, basically all of the other ones, those are addressed to like a whole church.
Yeah.
And then, so is this one like Paul's letter to the Ephesians part 2, or?
Yeah, it's actually interesting because it's because even though it's addressed to Timothy, there's bits and pieces here in the letter where it seems like he's addressing the entire church through Timothy. And you are right; it's kind of different from the other letters that Paul wrote, like Romans, Corinthians, where he directly addressed the church. In this case, we find him addressing a guy he'd left in charge. This group of letters are called pastoral letters because they're like, another example is Titus.
Yeah.
It's Paul sort of as an older minister, an older missionary, guiding a church through someone he'd left in charge.
And so the situation's kind of a unique situation.
Yeah.
These are people Paul is like
Yes.
handpicked to be leaders.
Yeah.
So it's so they lead the church, like Timothy leads the church at Ephesus. So like Paul writing to Timothy, he's writing both to Timothy and also kind of to the church.
Yes.
Okay. Gotcha. Why that kind of intermediary this time? Like, so, because Paul has no problem writing to whole churches before.
Yeah,
but
clearly.
like Paul loves writing. He wrote like the New Testament. So what's kind of behind, like, why does Paul personally like address Timothy this time?
Yeah. Actually, I thought that was interesting too, and I think a probable reason for this is the nature of the problems that the church at Ephesus was facing. So the church at Ephesus had issues that sort of stemmed from the leadership as well. Because there were elders in charge in addition to Timothy. And normally what would happen is that when Paul would write a letter to church, it would go through the elders, and the elders would be the one to like share with the entire church.
Oh, so like, okay, yeah.
So in this case, there were, as we'll see later on in the letter, there were serious problems with the leadership in the church. And scholars suspect that given the content of First Timothy, because there's a lot of criticism of the leadership of the church in Ephesus, aside from Timothy, of course, Paul preferred to go through someone he'd left in charge personally, as opposed to just addressing it to the whole church, because it might have not even gotten read to the whole church in that case, right? Oh. It's possible that it might have just disappeared.
Because if like Paul has like correction, and then there's these elders who are kind of sus.
Yeah.
And then like some messenger like unwittingly delivers it to the elders because it's to the whole church. Then those others might be like, oh dang, we don't want to read this.
Yeah.
But because Paul knows Timothy, like he trusts him and there's like a relationship there.
Yeah.
Paul's like, okay, I'm going to entrust you with this duty of maintaining like the spiritual health of the church.
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. The elders, what is going on with them? Like what is their deal?
Yeah.
Why is Paul like why does Paul go to these lengths to correct them? Like what are they being corrected for?
Yeah, so if we look at I think it's in chapter 2 and towards the end, chapter 2, chapter 4 and chapter 6.
Oh,
we kind of get a hint. So chapter 2 I'm looking at sorry, not chapter 2, chapter 1 towards the end, verse 19 to 20.
Okay.
So he mentions actually two of these supposedly leaders in the church who have sort of veered off the right direction, Hymenaeus and Alexander. And so so that's the first hint that we get, that things are not going well at the church. And he elaborates further what kind of things are not going well. So if we go a little bit further back in chapter 1 still, verse 6. So it says, certain persons by swerving from these have wandered away into vain discussion, desiring to be teachers of the law without understanding either what they're saying or the things about which they make confident assertions. So we have a group of people who are making some very bold statements and claims, and then claims that are not kind of in line with essential doctrine of the gospel, and they're leading other people away from the gospel through that as well. And then verses 19 to 20, we see two of them are mentioned, Hymenaeus and Alexander. And then if we move forward to to chapter 4, again we get to see a hint of what they're talking about through.
Wait, sorry, where are we now?
So we're in chapter 4.
I was hearing an airplane, so I closed the window.
Oh. So Paul talks a little bit about the false doctrine. So it's almost as if there are two flavors here. So in chapter 4 we see that there's so verse 3 or verse 2, through the insincerity of liars whose consciences are seared, who forbid marriage and require abstinence from foods that God created to be received with thanksgiving by those who believe and know the truth. For everything God created is good, and nothing is to be rejected if it is received with thanksgiving. So we get a hint that, one, they're sort of saying that marriage is wrong and bad, and the certain foods are also wrong and bad. And this is kind of in line with some of the aesthetic ideals of Greek philosophy that were going on at the time, where like anything to do with the physical is considered like somewhat inferior to things that are sort of spiritual, right?
Oh, I've heard, that's kind of like Gnosticism.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. Yeah.
So it might be, it's not for sure, but maybe something.
Yeah, it might be something along those lines. Yeah.
Okay, sure.
And then, so that's one flavor of the heresy that was going on. There's
flavor.
Yeah, so...
Okay.
Okay, I guess your flavors of heresy. I'm trying to look for the other flavor, or the other kind, with genealogies and myths.
Oh, I've heard about
it's
that one.
It's escaping my mind right now.
I think he talks about that in 2 Timothy.
Yes, he does. Okay. Yes, he does.
And we'll get to that one later.
Never mind. It's in the beginning. Chapter 1. So
Oh, yeah,
chapter
okay.
1,
That's verse 4.
verse 4, yeah.
Yeah.
Nor to okay, I'll just start from verse 3. As I urged you when I was going to Macedonia, remain at Ephesus so that you may charge certain persons not to teach any different doctrine, nor to devote themselves to myths and endless genealogies, which promote speculations rather than stewardship from God that is by faith. So, again, we don't have the entire picture, so we can sort of like piece things together through, I guess, hints like this. And it seems like this was probably a heresy that was from the Jewish kind of side of things.
So we have a Jewish-ish heresy, and then we have like a Greekish
heresy.
Gentile-ish heresy.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the Gentile heresy is the asceticism, the denying of like the material world kind
Yeah.
of thing, and then the Jewish heresy is like you look at kind of all these old stories, myths, and then genealogies, and you kind of construct a whole like I guess theology around that.
Yeah.
But then Paul's like, oh, okay, don't like. I guess he uses this language elsewhere, but like don't swerve either to this side or to that side.
Yeah.
But just like keep your eyes on like the gospel, like specifically.
Yeah. It could be that the very elders who Paul is bringing up and talking about in the later sections were the very ones who were promoting these heresies and these false teachings. But what we do know for sure is that there were false teachings in Ephesus.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wait, because if I go back to Acts 19, right? Acts chapter 19. I think I remember reading this. He says... Oh, sorry, it's chapter 20. So Paul plants in Ephesus in 19, and then he leaves.
Oh, the speech, right?
And then he comes back, and he gives a speech to the elders.
Yeah.
He says, Oh, something about wolves.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So what is... Oh, I know that after my departure, fierce wolves will come in among you, not sparing the flock, and from among your own selves will arise men speaking twisted things to draw away the disciples after them. So is that related to what's going on?
Yeah. So, and it's crazy because this happened like way before this letter was written. So I guess in some sense, Paul might have had suspicions that this would happen. Maybe he saw like inklings as he was ministering to the Ephesians. He saw the possibility of people like developing certain false doctrines and then sort of holding strongly to that and swerving away from the truth. Hence, he gave them that warning before he left.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's all. Okay. Yeah, reading. I just kind of glancing over as we're talking about this. Like, what are some tips to like how to understand this and how to like apply it? Like, how should I like be reading this letter intending to obey? Like what should I be like looking for?
One, the warnings that are given about the false teachers seriously, because if you look at what Paul is trying to say, it's not like this temptations to like be puffed up about knowledge or to be a love of money or to wander off into like vain discussions and arguments and endless like myths and genealogy. It's not like that is a temptation that's unique to a leader or a teacher, right? Actually, I can do it.
Yeah. As you were
can do it.
As you were kind of like naming them, like just kind of pulling out those points that are in the chapter, I was like, oh, I think I've done that. Oh, I'm at risk of that one. Oh, I've definitely done that one. Oof.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, so that's one thing you can do. Just take the warnings about the false teachers, and on the other side of the spectrum, if you look at what Paul considers to be qualifications for like good leaders in the church, we can look to model and embody those qualities in our lives. Even though, I mean, I guess we're not leaders, but then we should be looking to be like the model of a good leader.
So that's like the overseers and deacons.
Yeah. So like the overseers and the deacons, like the character attributes that he talks about. Each of us is called to be a minister, and even though we may not have a position in the church, there's work that God has for us in His kingdom to do, and these are attributes that will come into play when we're laboring in the kingdom of God. We don't really have to have a position to need to be respectable, hospitable, or even able to teach. Like we all have non-Christian friends whom we can reach out to, and so we can look to embody these qualities.
Like I'm reading this like above reproach, self-controlled, like respectable. Like these are all like godly good things, and I I guess if I were to be like, oh man, I'm not an overseer, I'm not a deacon, I don't have to be self-controlled. Haha! Like, it just seems, yeah, okay, that makes sense. I can kind of see that.
The other thing that I think is really helpful, and I know we're all like staying at home, shelter in place.
Yeah.
Just set some time,
Stuck with you, man.
like 20 minutes, 30 minutes, read through the entire letter. What that does is that it helps you as you're doing your DT daily, because we get like excerpts, right? We don't get like the whole passage.
Right.
You kind of see like what points are emphasized and repeated, and you get to see the connections between different sections of the whole letter. And then secondly, that's how we read letters, or I guess emails, because we don't really write letters anymore. Yeah.
Like, you don't like take an email and you're like, you pull apart a single sentence and then try to understand what the whole person is saying. Like, you read the whole thing, and then in the flow of the whole thing, then that one sentence makes a lot more sense. Like, what I'd like to do is the ESV has like an audio book thing.
Yeah.
So then, like, if I know like this new book is coming up, like we're gonna start a new book in DT, then maybe while I'm like washing dishes, like a couple days before it starts, I'll put on like the audio book and listen to it, and just kind of get the like a big picture idea.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. So that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And now for our second commercial break. We upgraded. Thank you. Shout out to my peer. Hi, I'm Josh.
And I'm Duncan.
And welcome back to Bibles, Brothers, and Bites. And now for part 3 of our episode, The
Bite!
Woo! All right. This week's bite is... Dang it. And this week's bite is... Strawberry Pop-Tarts!
You know, it's been a long time since I last had a Pop-Tart.
Really?
Yeah.
I think you're supposed to eat these warm, actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Wow, look at that color. Look at that. See the sprinkles? Does it make a crack? No.
No, it does not.
Can't even hear that. That was a... Oh, I'm dropping crumbs. What do you taste?
Just a red thing. Is it? Like... Oh, that's a strawberry. Oh, yeah.
That's a strawberry
because like a jam kind of flavor.
Yeah. It actually tastes... like, taste-wise, it's okay. Texture-wise, it's very crumbly and leaves a lot to be desired, but the taste is okay. Oh, alright. That's it for this episode of Bibles, Brothers, and Bites. I'm Josh.
And I'm Duncan.
See you next time.
Bye-bye. Stay safe.
Bye. We need a vacuum cleaner.